Today we're going to look at the skills involved in working with other people. Now you may say, why Chris? Why are we looking at these skills? What makes them so important? And good question. I'm glad you asked that. The first thing to get your head around is this. There is a difference between getting on with people, being a nice person, and working effectively with people in a team to achieve something. And it's those skills that I'm talking about today. They're important because, firstly, they're just really valuable life skills. They're going to help you not just in work, but in your personal life. Secondly, employers love them. So if you can demonstrate that you have these skills, you're much more likely to get the job when you're applying for it. And one of the reasons employers love them is if you are good at working in a team and you're good at working with other people, the projects and work you're involved in are much more likely to be successful. Now the challenge with these skills is it can be very hard to tell how good we are from the inside looking out. It's often much easier if you've got somebody else assessing you from the outside looking in. So the first thing we're going to discuss about this is a thing called critical reasoning. Now you may say, Chris, I don't really need this video because I'm really good at working with other people. And my response to that would be, how do you know? Critical reasoning is the ability to assess your own performance, to assess yourself. You may have come across people in your life who you and everyone else can see aren't very good at something, but they think they're brilliant at it. And in fairness to them, it's really hard to assess yourself. Some people are naturally better at it than others, but it's difficult to see yourself from the inside. What you really need is somebody to watch what you do and give you feedback. So my response to you now when we talk about critical reasoning is, don't assume you're good at this. When we talk about working with other people, there are always new things to learn and there are always ways you can improve. Tuckmans Stages of a Group. Now, Tuckman did some observations and studies on what happens when you get a bunch of people and you put them together to work on something, like in a team. And what he found was the groups tend to go through predictable stages. So it's worth knowing these, because if you start a new job and you're working with new people or a new project, you're going to go through these stages. So it's worth understanding them. And to make it easier to remember, they all rhyme. Okay, so the first thing that Tuckman noticed was what they called the forming stage. Forming is when the groups first meet. People are just finding out who everybody is, and what he observed was we have a tendency in the forming stage to be overly polite and to hold our real personalities back a little bit. We're not giving anything away at this stage. We want to see what everyone else is doing. Who are these people? What are they like? I'm not going to overcommit just yet. So we tend to be a bit reserved in the forming stage. Once we get past that, we go into the storming phase. Now, storming is where we feel comfortable enough to let our real personalities out, and this causes friction. We may not get on with other people. They may say things that wind us up, and we may say things that wind them up. Some people do not survive the storming period, and I don't mean that they die. What I mean is they quit, or they just decide they don't want to be involved in this group anymore. They get out of it. Now that storming phase could come hours, days, weeks after the forming stage, but it's going to happen. So be aware of that. There's going to be a point where everybody starts to just get on each other's nerves. The good news is that doesn't last forever in most groups. Tuckman noticed that once you get through that, the storm's clear and we enter what's known as the norming phase. Norming is where we get on with the job. All the frictions and things have been resolved and put to one side. The dust has cleared and we are now just getting on with working with each other. That's good, but it's not as good as the last stage, which is performing. Performing isn't just where we're getting on with the job, it's where we're doing it as well as we can. It's where a team start to understand each other. usually because they've spent some time together and they're working to their strengths. So I know that so-and-so over here is really good at that, and they do that, and I know that so-and-so over here is really good at that, and they do that, and I'm really good at this little thing, so I'm getting on with that. And we kind of understand each other. You hear it a lot in sports. You'll sometimes hear very successful football teams and players will say things like, I know if I kick the ball over there, he'll be there or she'll be there. I don't have to look for them. I just know that they'll be there. That's performing. That's when a team isn't just working well, they're working to their maximum potential. And that takes a bit of time. Now then, there is another step that Tuckman didn't come up with, but sometimes people add on to it. And that's called mourning. Not first thing in the morning, but mourning as in grieving, as if something's died or ended. And that's when groups come to an end. Say you're working on a project, or you've been working with a team and the team have completed the project, or they've come to a point where the team's going to break up, or you're going to leave that team. What was recognised by some people was that it can be difficult for people to come to terms with not being part of that team anymore, not being involved in that project anymore. And the effect can be very similar to going through a mourning process. And sometimes people need support with that. You often see this when people are presented with things like redundancies, and when a company starts to fall apart and people are getting laid off. It can be a very difficult emotional time for people, and they can need extra support. Aim and objectives. Now, whenever you start to work on something with other people, there will be an aim and there will be objectives. They might not necessarily be called those things, but all essentially they are is this. An aim is, what is it you're trying to achieve? Now that's important because it's important that you understand that. It's also important that everyone else understands it, and it's important that you all have the same aim. You don't want to have a different, or think you're trying to achieve something different to what everybody else is, because then you're going off in different directions. It's also important that everyone understands what it is you're trying to do, because then it gives you a sense of motivation, a sense of focus. This is what we do in this role. The aim doesn't have to be super specific. It's often what I call a t-shirt slogan, something you could write on a t-shirt. So for instance, I am a customer training officer, and the aim of my training is to provide our customers with the skills and knowledge they need to improve their own lives. It's a nice, snappy, short sentence, but when I explain it to people, hopefully it makes sense and people kind of get their heads around it. They go, oh, that's what you do. Objectives are how you achieve that aim. So they're the kind of goals that you chop up that aim into specifics. So it's how you achieve it, and it's specifically we do 1, 2, 3 or A, B, C, and you divide that up and you say we're going to achieve our aim by doing these very concrete specific steps. When you work with other people, you'll be working towards objectives, and those objectives are like steps on a staircase that lead you towards achieving your aim, the thing that you are trying to achieve. This may all sound obvious, and you may be wondering why am I mentioning it, but I have been involved in things in the past, not in this job, but in previous jobs, where that was not so clear. When you would say to people, what is it we're trying to achieve here? And they go, well, it's a bit of this, it's a bit of that. It was vague, nondescript, a bit foggy and blurry. And the problem there is, if it's not nailed down concrete and you've got a clear idea of what it is, it means different things to different people. And you find the teams don't work very well because they're not really sure what they're supposed to be doing. So what makes a good team member? What are the skills involved in working with other people? And as you've probably guessed, there are a lot potentially, but I just want to focus on a handful of the main ones. Firstly, communication skills. And we do have another video, which I'll put the link here for, if you want to go and check that out. It's a lot more sophisticated communication than you may think. But ultimately, communication is the glue that holds teams together. The better you are at communicating, the better you are at dealing with so many of the issues that teams face. It's also important, another skill is awareness of what's going on in the team. You shouldn't just be blinkered and focusing purely on what you're doing and what your problems are. You should have some awareness of the other people in your team and what they're dealing with. Because if they are struggling, the other thing we try and do is support each other. So if someone is struggling and you've got a bit of capacity or the ability to help them, we talk to them, we offer help, we support each other. That's what good teams do. Equally, you should be focused on the aim and objectives. What is it the team is trying to achieve? You should always have in the back of your mind, I'm doing this, but ultimately we're trying to achieve that. And is there any way I can help us get a bit closer to our aim? So you should also be offering ideas and suggestions towards that. It's everybody's responsibility to try and think of ways that they can help the team get that little bit closer to what they're trying to achieve. And that in itself, to come back to the communication, is a two-way process. You should be offering ideas, but equally you should be listening and supporting other people's ideas, creating a sort of atmosphere where people feel comfortable that they can offer suggestions and they can offer ideas and they won't get laughed at. They'll actually be encouraged. So good teams communicate, they're aware of each other and what they're going through, they support each other, they are focused on their aim and objectives, they all are offering suggestions and ideas, and they're listening and supporting and encouraging each other. Good teams build each other up, not tear each other down. What makes a good leader? Now, teams often have leaders, whether it's a formal leader, i.e. somebody is given a job role and a title, you're a project manager or something, or even if not given to anybody, often when you put a team together on something, leaders will just naturally emerge. We do exercises in various courses where we put people together in little projects, and then we'll often in the debriefing ask the group, who do you think is the leader? And they might never have discussed it, but it's quite common for groups to point to somebody and say, I think that person is our leader. It's usually quite a big surprise to that person as well. They didn't see themselves as a leader necessarily, but the group will pick out the reasons why that person is their leader. And this really is where we come to the myth of leadership. It's often people have this idea that leadership is about some big heroic character, sort of, follow me guys, running off and everybody charges after them. That in a work environment is not really what leadership is about. Leadership in a team is usually the person in the middle of everything who's making sure that everyone else is involved, they're encouraged, they're supported, they have what they need to do the job, and they understand what's expected of them. It's much more of a kind of mother type role, if you like, than it is a kind of hero charging over a cliff edge sort of thing. And when we go through that, it's very common for teams to actually point to somebody and say, that person does that for us, therefore they are our leader. And I've seen people quite surprised when everybody points to them because they do that stuff, but they never thought of it as leadership. A lot of the skills involved in leadership, and obviously there's a massive different information on leadership skills, but I just want to pick on a few. A lot of the skills involved are the same skills in being a good team member. So the biggest one is communication skills again. It's about how you communicate and interact with people. But there's also a little bit of conflict management, a little bit of negotiation. It's about awareness. It's about awareness of what's going on in the team. It's about supporting people and encouraging them. Leaders don't have to be the ones that come up with all the good ideas either. A really good leaders will draw the ideas out of the team, and then they'll recognize the good ideas and they'll support them and encourage them and make sure they happen. They don't have to be the ones that come up with all the ideas themselves. Also, they don't do everything themselves. They'll delegate and they'll understand. Hopefully they'll be at that performing stage in Tuckmans Stages of a group where they know this person is really good at this and this person works really well on these kind of tasks. So they'll delegate tasks and work to their strengths. A good leader can engineer that kind of delegation of roles and tasks so that the team achieves its aim and objectives as efficiently as possible. Probably the last thing to say is you may have heard the expression empowerment, or about empowering people. Good leaders empower the people in their teams. And it might sound quite technical or complicated, but all it really means is empowerment is that you're giving people the tools and resources and the confidence to get on with a job themselves. You're building people up, you're encouraging them, and good leaders empower people and build those individuals up so the team itself is stronger as a whole. Working with other people is a practical skill, so it's very difficult to teach that skill just through a video. I hope you understand that. Normally when we deliver these sessions, we get people together and we give them some little exercises, and then we debrief and pull out what those skills are, what people are really good at, and what they need to work a bit more on. Often the test where you really see people come out with their strengths and where people come out with areas that need developing is when you put them under a little bit of pressure. So we'll often put teams together and we will give them a little task and put them under a little bit of pressure. And this is where it comes back to what I mentioned right at the beginning. It's very common for people to start off being very good at getting on with everyone else. They may be very likable people, and when they sit down and they're just in a room with everybody else, they all get on. But when you put them under pressure in a work environment and they're trying to achieve an aim and an objective, and there's a little bit of stress involved, they can change quite dramatically. And we see that a lot in these kind of exercises, that people can be great and get on with everybody, but then when you put them under a bit of stress, they start to struggle. So don't, as I was talking in the critical reasoning, don't assume because you're a nice person and you get on with people that you're good at this. We can all learn things and we can all develop more. In the future, after the pandemic and lockdown eases off and we get back to some normal training, we will be doing sessions and we will encourage you to come in and have a go. We do these skills as part of a lot of our employment programs, as part of our accredited programs, because they're so valuable. The skills involved in working with other people are so valuable to everybody throughout their lives, and we often take them for granted, that most people find them quite useful. So I hope you've found this interesting. I hope you've learned something, and until we see each other again, take care, stay safe, and goodbye.